Hey everybody, welcome to the Script and Style Show. I'm Todd Gardner from Trek.js, and my co-host David Walsh, creator of the popular blog davidwalsh.name. How's it going today, David?
Well, for once, Todd, you're not the podcast curmudgeon. I think it's me this week, and I'll tell you why. I sent out a tweet today asking people what their dev pet peeves were. Now, as we grow older or we get more experience and things change in tech, that pet peeve changes a lot. In the early days, my pet peeve was browsers having different APIs for different things, and I'd be all annoyed because something would work over here but not over here. At the ripe old age of 35, my new pet peeve is having to deal with merge conflicts. Just deal with them at all, especially when you're rebasing, right? Like, if I could pay an intern to do this stuff for me, I would do it. Like, it reminds me back when I was in high school, and I did this like 6-page paper, and the hard drive failed, right? So paper gone. Now I could rewrite the paper, but I so hate redoing work so badly that I just didn't do the paper and I just took the F. Like, I didn't care. I wasn't going to do it again. And for me, that's what dealing with merge conflicts and rebasing is. Just doing your homework again. And I cannot do it. How about you, man? What's your pet peeve in the dev world right now?
When people are late. Because thanks to me, we are recording this show late. And so I am ultra mortified because I'm super annoyed when other people are late. And now I am late.
Seriously though, tech-wise, what's your big pet peeve? What do you absolutely loathe?
Oh, when people use sledgehammers to solve tiny problems. So like if you need to Ajax post a form and you're like, I know, I need Angular or I need React just to Ajax post a form. I'm like, well, maybe you don't. Maybe you could just slap some JavaScript. Or oh, you need a server. Clearly you need Kubernetes and Docker. Do you? You need one server. One. Just really. That's my pet peeve.
That's pretty reasonable. That's a reasonable pet peeve. But we have some guests that we need to get to who I'm sure have pet peeves as well.
We do. We have 3 awesome individuals joining our panel today on static typing for JavaScript. First up, Paul Everett, the developer advocate from JetBrains for PyCharm and WebStorm. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Thanks for having me.
Matt Wagner, a consultant at Keyhole Software in Kansas City. He does training for React and TypeScript. Thanks for coming on, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
And Paulo Gretner. Shit, I probably screwed that up. Currently a consultant at Secure Now, Meeting Evolution, and a JavaScript teacher at Career Foundry.
Yes. I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And thanks for jumping up on Twitter and volunteering to come up on the show and talk about Flow. All right. So before we get into our main topic of the day, there's a little bit of news that you wanted to talk about, David.
Yeah, I saw a really interesting article called Nice People Matter, NPM may stand for Not Politely Managed. And so there were a lot of tweets flying around with regard to layoffs at NPM. And I guess the long and short of it, what made me interested in it was the fact that NPM had goals of growing their revenue 10 to 20 times from 3 million to, do the multiplication there. And in doing so, they hired a CEO from the startup industry. And the whole idea of Nice People Matter and Google's Don't Be Evil doesn't really work with the sort of fast-paced, startup energy, right? On one side of startups, you have, we're going to change the world. This is super exciting technology, so on and so forth. But then on the flip side of it, you get the sort of reality where people are getting, young kids out of college are getting burnt out and they're getting overworked. And they're working in some cases for stock options they might never get. And so I just thought the article was really interesting. I'm also a bit nervous about a tool that so many people rely on in NPM, sort of being in the hands of how do I
A
say
totally
it?
unsustainable corporate interest that could disappear any day.
Super harsh, but yes, absolutely. That scares me a lot. That we all rely on it so much, in that it could be, mismanaged, or like you said, it could go away. Now, remember, we talked about GitHub being acquired by Microsoft, and we had sort of the same. There was a scary aspect to it, but at least with Microsoft, Microsoft's not going anywhere, right? It's not like they're suddenly going to run out of money tomorrow. With NPM, you don't know what's going to happen, right? So part of you thinks, if they don't make it on their own, damn it, we're going to need a Microsoft to come along and right this ship and ensure they stay around. So I just thought it was a really interesting article that people should check out from the Register in the UK. It was really good.
Absolutely. I was following the tweets when that was going down last week. And yeah, it's this weird thing where, NPM plays in this free software world. Everybody depends on it. Everybody uses it, and nobody pays. But it's still this, corporate interest that, needs to pay people salaries so that they can live. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years. All right, but let's move on to our main topic of the day. We're going to talk about static typing in JavaScript. And so I guess the first problem is that the first thing we need to talk about is what is the problem here? There is a type system in JavaScript. There's strings and booleans and objects and numbers. Why do we need more type checking? Why do we need more stuff?
I think the server guys wanted to jump into a language that they hated, and no, I'm just kidding. So I'll be honest. Up until 2 years ago, I hadn't worked with typing systems in JavaScript. I hadn't thought about it. It wasn't something that I was interested in. And part of me was like, damn it, I got into JavaScript because I didn't want to deal with all that crap, right? When I went to college, everything was taught in Java. And just to get your stuff running, it was, class, whatever, private, static, void, main, that's where the main thing kicked off and ran. And I was like, this sucks, man. I want to just be able to write a single line of code, not worry about anything else, and jump into it. But now that I'm working on something that I would consider more critical at Mozilla, which is the DevTools debugger, type checking has saved my ass quite a bit. And so why do we need it? Just for that case, right? I think that.
So what do you mean it saved your ass? How has it saved your ass? What did you do wrong that it saved you?
So, for example, I was updating a function, assuming that what was coming in was of a certain type. And then I quickly found out that, I was going to use a function that existed. And when I made a call to it, this thing might not return anything, and everything that I've written in my function that uses that function was going to blow up. That's just one reason. But I'd be interested to hear from, let's start out with Matthew, why did we need type checking? When did this come in? Why is it important?
Well, you made a good point when you brought up Java, and that's actually where I came to like type systems in JavaScript, because I actually started from that server-side background. So for me, it was a bit of a comfort level thing, but at the same time, I found especially that working with teams and across teams, because I do consulting in a lot of enterprise environments, it makes a lot of sense when you need to share code and communicate meaning to have it encoded into types and not have to guess, if you're passing the right thing to a function or what it might return.
Sure. And when you said it made you feel comfortable, is it just because it looked familiar, or you're like, oh, I needed those type checks in my Java world. Thank God I can get them here.
I think it's a little both. I did start there, so it was a level of oh yeah, I know this. But at the same time, it was from the frustration that I'd had with, you know, quote unquote regular JavaScript and running into problems, you know, having those unexpected runtime errors happen. And now I have a way to guard against them.
Yeah, awesome. Paul, how about you?
I will echo what you said about background. I'm a freaking Python guy. Why am I on this panel? Since when do I know anything about type systems? But as I approached my JavaScript projects, first of all, I'm a man of a certain age. I can't be bothered to remember yesterday. I can't be bothered to remember an hour ago. Do I trust what I did? Do we trust what we do as a team? Which I think Matthew was just mentioning about putting meaning into the code so that the team can trust what was done. And I found that, I don't know if any of you have ever looked at the GTD, Getting Things Done system. Part of GTD is about having an outboard brain and getting stuff out of your brain into the trusted system and letting the trusted system remember it instead of your brain always nagging you about that damn thing you forgot to do. I found that encoding the meaning into TypeScript let me relax. It let me trust the code. It let me walk away. My future self will look back on my present self instead of hating the present self. Will actually be like, hey, you know, you did okay there. So those are some of the things that I found attractive about it.
Awesome. And Paulo, how about yourself?
Different from everybody else here that had prior experience with typing, I never really had that experience because I always worked. I started like 1998 and doing HTML, and then the backend language was PHP. PHP really does not have type checking, right? And the first time that I ever had contact with type checking was when Angular 2 decided to adopt TypeScript. Well, it was the very first time that I ever heard about type checking. But I did not even bother working with that. I was working with Angular 1 in the company that I was like doing consulting before. But right after they switched over to Angular 2, I left the company and went back to PHP. And then years later, when I went back to JavaScript, then I went back to straight to React. And that when was the first time that actually I got in contact to really work with types, and it was Flow. Flow was the very first one that was presented to me. And when I got contact and I saw that, wow, I'm preserving the information that is coming through this function, or what I'm calling, that thing literally blew my mind, because I never, like I said, like working 15 years in the field, never really had that security that, like, whatever is coming, I know what is coming. You know, if I'm doing something in, like, for example, integration with my IDE, and constantly remind me, oh, you should not have do that, or you have to fix something before, because the value that you're receiving will actually blow your function. You know, so, and I found that. And like I cannot start a new project today without setting up Flow or type checking, you know, whatever it is, because I feel that gives me more confidence. And even for my team, you know, like they know that like if I build that, they see the typings, they see everything there, everybody's secure. And then we pass, like when we go to commit and everything before merging, it passed through the test and everything, and literally saves, like save the ass, like everybody's like I literally saved my ass in the past as well.
Yeah.
So as you guys were talking about it, you talked about both TypeScript and Flow. These are two different like transpiling tools, right? They're both. I'm not super familiar with Flow. Is Flow a transpiler like TypeScript, where you're writing in kind of a different language and it compiles it down to JavaScript?
You do have some of declarative ways, and looks like it's not really JavaScript sometimes, but it feels more JavaScript, if we can say, you know. The few times that I ever worked with TypeScript did not feel kind of feel a different language, even though it's a superset of JavaScript, you know, like you can actually write some JavaScript there and it will work. but for me, never really. I feel that I was learning a new language.
Yeah.
I don't know about the other.
There's a bigger difference for sure. Yeah.
And Matthew, you use TypeScript more, yes?
Yes. I've used Flow in the past, and I have since transitioned to using TypeScript exclusively.
By choice or
By choice.
by mandate? Okay.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear why.
Sure. The bullet points essentially are I develop on Windows all day, and mostly Windows computers. I found the tooling support for Flow to be lacking in a Windows environment, and TypeScript works perfectly in VS Code, which is my primary editor.
Gee, I wonder why.
All three are Microsoft.
Right? Imagine that. But that was the primary reason. The community, the amount of types that you get through the community, those are all, I think, just big wins. You know, they both accomplish the same things. Flow is theoretically a more sound type system than TypeScript, from what I read. But all things considered, like on balance, I think TypeScript is just, it kind of wins out in all of the major ways that I care about.
So a lot of the libraries out there produce TypeScript like type definitions so that it's easily to be digested. Does Flow do the same thing? Does Flow like consume those same type definitions, or does it have its own format, or is there a different place that this exists?
There is. As far as I recall, I think you have a set of flow types, and then TypeScript is the types repository. I forget the name of it. It's basically just committed by the community. Unless the developer of a certain library has developed their library with TypeScript and is exporting the types.
No, you actually have to do the same. You have to do the same thing on Flow. You have to write your own types for your library, stuff like that. It does not digest. I wish that it could digest TypeScript types.
Mm-hmm.
You know, would be awesome. Like if it does, I still did not find a way to do that. But like, to be honest, I'm not really that worried. You know. But like for me, it was easier for me to adapt, like I said, because it feels more JavaScript-ish. So when you're writing a type, you literally writing almost JavaScript way. And unless you really want to be very fine-grained, like little declarative, then you will write a different code. But like in TypeScript, it's I feel like again, I feel like it's a different language.
So let's back up away from the specifics of each individual tool and maybe talk a bit about like what are the advantages of doing this? So like if I want to change and learn a new paradigm, be that Flow or be that TypeScript, what are the advantages that I would get off of that? Paul, you want to talk about that?
Sure. I just finished up a monster tutorial, video, code, text, on the intersection between React, TypeScript, and TDD, using our IDEs, WebStorm and PyCharm. And the point I was trying to make was failing faster. How can you get a lot more productive using typing somewhat in the way that people use TDD, test-driven development, to surface your errors as soon as possible in kind of a continuous development cycle? And I found that paradigm when hooked up to, I think we've all talked about, you know, smarter IDEs that can put in your face when you violated the contract. That lets you fail faster than failing from a test, because you have to write the test and you have to run the test. Whereas if you pass an int to a string, you'll get a red squiggly immediately. And failing faster, I found, is a compelling benefit. It's not just eat your vegetables, you know, do typing because it's It's the grown-up way to do it. It actually increases my velocity. It also increases my velocity on TDD because I've got kind of a contract with myself. And if I've got some React component over there and I'm writing a test, my test assertion will fail as I'm typing because I violated the contract.
That makes sense. I mean, one advantage to typing, and one reason that I rely on it so much, and I'm happy to see it these days, is because it's sort of a really great way of documenting your code, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you say up front what's coming in and what's going out, you're going to be able to better maintain what you have. And also you're going to be able to better jump into other code bases that you don't know all that much about.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking to documenting, the type system will actually allow you to generate documentation because of the introspection that you could get.
Yeah, like coming, like for example, on PHP, I remember you have the docs in the top, like in the functions, and there you actually write what type of variable that you're receiving, or not variable, the parameters you're receiving, the function, stuff like that. But like it's totally on the comment part. Like you're really commenting and to document that. Like if you write the types, you don't really need to comment anything in your code, because but the typing already shows to you what you expect and what you're gonna be receiving, or what gonna be the outcome from that function, you know. And yeah, it's a great way to share your code as well. Like when you're sharing your code with your teammates, right? They right away would read that and understand literally what's going on.
So what is the tooling situation with these sort of things? Like, I think you both mentioned that like one of the advantages here is as I'm writing, I'll get like instant feedback about it. Is this something that's just baked into all the tools? Like, can I use a JetBrains product or a VS Code or Vim or anything and get this sort of feedback? Or like, what do I have to do in order to get this integration with these tools?
I'll let Paul speak to his tool.
We're an IDE, not an editor. And that's one of the lines between an IDE and an editor is code analysis at a structural semantic level rather than string matching and stuff like that. The world of TypeScript is interesting because the TypeScript project itself ships a language server for tools to hook into, for IDEs and editors to hook into. And it goes beyond red squiggly into refactoring. Let the language server rewrite your code to change this to an arrow function or something like that. And watching the TypeScript project over the last, 9 months, each release, and they make a lot of releases, they run their project really well. You can see they keep adding refactorings and things like this so that the interface between the tool and the type system is quite robust.
Does the same thing exist for Flow? Is there similar integrations?
I'm a WebStorm user, you know, and like the tool that WebStorm provides to me is the instant feedback. I do use VS, but like the integration with VS Code is not as great. So that's why I'm still paying for WebStorm, you know, and I'm happy to pay because not only that, that is a lot more things that gives to me. The refactoring part is great, but anyway, we're not talking about that. But the tooling that the flows offer to me through my IDE, and like I have really fast like reaction from the IDE to alert me like, oh, look, you're missing there, or you can go back and refactor this and refactor that, and are you missing a type here? So that tool, because when the first time I started working with Flow, we had to go and on the terminal and like literally flow check and like we'll analyze your code, and like that was a pain because you had all your code done already, you know, and then you have to go and refactor. Now with those type of tools that instant like give the feedback to you, oh, that helps a lot. And like that what that makes me more productive, forces me to write better code, you know. So not type checking not only does all what we said, but it helps me to write better code, you know.
I have a question for you. Is it okay if I do a follow-up on that? Because you made me think of something. If someone hates IDEs, do you think they'll probably hate typing systems? Is that kind of the same part of the brain?
If they correlate between them, yeah, they probably will hate. But there's other advantages as well, not only because of the IDE part. Like I said, it documents your code. It helps you to share your code and people understand everything. So and writes you better. It's not only because of the IDE part, you know. There's a lot more things involved, and yeah,
I feel like they're independent because there have definitely been times. I can't think of a specific one with TypeScript, but where I've used like static analysis tools or checking tools or styling tools that I didn't integrate into the editor that I was using at the time because I just wanted to type fast. And sometimes I'm just super frustrated by plugins like getting in my way and slowing it down. But like I see it in the terminal next to me so that I can react to it. Like, yep, I know that I just wrote something that's total garbage, but I'm just playing right now. And so I want to ignore you actively. And so separating it from the IDE, from the editor, I can see it being helpful sometimes. No follow-up. Everybody thinks that's a stupid idea. Okay, so let's talk about why might we not want to use these tools? So like some people are probably listening to the show and they've heard about Flow and they've heard about TypeScript and they've heard about static typing, but maybe they're not using it yet. What would be reasons why this is not a good idea? You know, nothing is a panacea, nothing's a silver bullet. Why would you not want to do this?
The only reason I see is a prototype, when you just want to do a quick thing to prototype, not really. Like if you really want to do a production, yeah, go ahead.
Prototypes go to production, right? No.
All the time.
Against the developer's wishes. So I've said that Flow has saved my ass. It's also kicked my ass quite a bit. There have been plenty of times where I submit a pull request. I think it looks great. Everything's good to go. Everything works. Oh, you forgot to add this type. Oh, I add a type. 50 errors spawn because of this, that, and the other thing, right? It is a time investment. And while you can acknowledge that it's going to save you on occasion, you need to put forth the investment up front to create good types. And if you don't create good types, you are going to be in a lot of trouble. And I can say that as someone who's lost hours of his life to something that is supposed to save my life.
Yeah, but like I have like there's this thing as well. There's this saying in Brazil, right? I'm Brazilian, so there's this saying in Brazil that I will say in Portuguese and translate in English, that pau que nasce torto não endireita. Look, the tree that like grows crooked won't go straight. You know, so if we start your project right, I believe it's worth the investment at the beginning. You know, to type check everything, to write good typings, to bring the right tools to the project. You know, probably that will be a slow start, but like you really will take advantage from the middle to the end. You really will take advantage of all this time that you invested at the beginning. You know. And because you won't have that much issues, you will have less tickets to fix bugs and stuff like that because you did right from the beginning, right from the get-go.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess one more, not necessarily knock, but one thing that people need to know is that, for example, Flow tries to create types for elements. you know, like a DOM node and such. And I've been bitten on numerous occasions because the version of Flow I was using, or, you know, Flow's master, didn't have a method that's been on elements for a while. Like, I think get element from point or get elements from point. So I had to YOLO and use the any type on that. Object.values is another one that I ran into with Flow typing. And I was like, what the hell? Why is this not passing? But of course, with object.values, it doesn't know what's coming back from the object. Battle scars. Hopefully I've saved people with just those comments there. But they're just things that people need to be aware of up front, the time investment and the fact that, you know, the types that are provided may not be perfect.
Yeah, like Flow is still in development, and in the community, they like, I know the community for Flow is way smaller. There's a lot of complaint that Facebook is not really dedicating the time. I don't know if that's true, but it's a complaint from the community that Facebook's not really dedicating the time and effort to really bring Flow to the same standard as TypeScript, you know? So it really missing some stuff, and TypeScript is doing a lot of things well. And of course, when you have a huge community pushing you to really do better, Microsoft is the type of company that really wants to win, you know, and they will like bring that thing hard to prove everybody that they still a huge player, you know. And they doing it right, even though I still did not adopt on my projects TypeScript. I'm sure I'll be doing in the near future because I literally feel that I'm missing out because Flow is still, like you said, there are a few things that we are missing from there.
So that's a good segue. So like, if we assume for the moment that we want to use one of these tools, we're starting up a project, or we're at a point where we're integrating one of these type system tools into our project makes a lot of sense. How do we go about deciding which one to do? I mean, we've heard good things. There's proponents in the conversation today on both sides of TypeScript and Flow. Matt, how would you go about like advising somebody on how to decide between these tools?
I think I would probably get a good look at their background. I feel like
the team's background.
Yeah, you know, let's say you're advising a team or a small group. If they have any server side experience, which I have anymore at least, cross training seems like a big thing. And there's a lot of full stack developers out there that have at least touched some sort of typed backend at some point. I think TypeScript is probably a good win for them because it'll feel at least familiar and let you get started quicker. Flow is a good option for, you know, maybe the pure JavaScript developers in my opinion. But even then, I would hesitate to recommend it simply because of some of the things I mentioned earlier regarding basically the community and really kind of the developer mind share that it seems to have gotten over Flow, even from teams within Facebook itself.
So you think even Facebook is gravitating more towards TypeScript lately?
Yeah, I believe Yarn switched to using TypeScript. There was one other prominent one. I'm not remembering it. But and I think Paulo was mentioning that there's been a bit of backlash lately among the community, in that Facebook doesn't appear to really be putting in as much work as, say, Microsoft is doing for TypeScript, as far as keeping up with features and interacting with the developer community.
Interesting. So, Paulo, you'd say the same thing, that, you know, right now it's looking like TypeScript is quote unquote winning the mindshare war here?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at like Vue.js or some new things like HyperApp, you really don't see them ever mention Flow. You do see them mention TypeScript some. And that becomes a key decider for which direction to go. let's say that you're doing something and you're participating in a large ecosystem like React or Gatsby. And you sign up for Gatsby, you're signing up for, I believe, 22,000 NPM packages in your node modules directory. Or if you're doing React.
Wait, don't sell me on it too hard.
Or create React app. When I did my tutorial, this is kind of a cautionary tale. When I did my long tutorial, it sat for a while because I was using a fork of create React app that was adding TypeScript capabilities. And then there were these rumors that create React app was going to, in 2.0, support TypeScript directly. So I sat on it and said, I'm not going to advertise, teach people to use something that's deprecated. So I'll wait, and create React app landed with the TypeScript support. And that was a big deal because you don't want to do the React ecosystem if you have to manage the build tools yourself. Jesus
Absolutely.
Christ.
Absolutely.
But when you introduce TypeScript into a ecosystem of build tools and related machinery and stuff like that, it becomes extremely sensitive to versions. And that thing that you wanted to do will work with a version of TypeScript, but not the other thing, which requires a different version of TypeScript. And what happened to me was I rewrote my tutorial to use create React app with the bundled TypeScript. And I made all the changes. And then before I could get it out the door, TS lent. Har, 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 har. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Said, hey, we're going to do away with TS lent TypeScript said we're going to support ES lent.
ES lent, yes.
And extend it to support TypeScript. And so create React app doesn't have a linter because they're stuck in between the two. And I'm stuck trying, do I teach TS lent or do I teach an ES lent, which is not enforcing anything? And then when you go over to Gatsby, you write your types in GraphQL, but you're a TypeScript person. So you write the exact same things over again in your TypeScript interfaces. So when you start looking at the ecosystem you participate in, it can help make some of those decisions.
So speaking of ecosystem, how does this play with like other JavaScript patterns that are happening or other patterns in the web? Like GraphQL is like this complex like set of types that come down over the wire. How does that work together?
I'll speak to that because I've found a great bit, a big win recently with using GraphQL to generate TypeScript types. I've done a talk on it. I feel like it's kind of the missing piece in modern JavaScript development because it lets you. Has anyone else experienced that? Have either of you looked at doing this, generating types from GraphQL?
I believe I might have gone to one of your talks.
Oh, well, great. I found it. I'll keep it short because I could talk about this all day, but I find it extremely compelling, especially when something as ephemeral as the data you're interacting with can really change at any time, and that's often a source of runtime errors.
Mm-hmm.
With GraphQL, you encode what you're working with kind of ahead of time, right? In the same way you'd build your types ahead of time, but generating it basically allows you to ship things that interact with data, components that won't error. Like as long as the red squiggles are gone, your app will work. As long as you don't go the David Walsh route and make them innies.
Oh man.
But
that's
when you're first starting anything, like you get a brand new task, a brand new feature, a brand new thing that you want to add, and you just start like roughing it into your application. Don't we all just like start with any? It's like, all right, I'm gonna need a function here. I don't know what it looks like. Just any, everything's any. It's just let me get started. And then
whenever I do any,
I've totally done that.
Yeah, whenever I do any, I put a to do. And my ID is smart enough to alert me that there are to-dos in my code. So I go back and then I have to do that.
Why don't you just call the word any a to-do?
Yeah, you should, right? Yeah, it's a good idea, Paul.
Yeah, it is. You can change the tag.
Yeah. Make an alias for it. That'd be great.
So if we're going to pull in these tools and we're going to get all the advantages of them, what kind of costs can we see? Like how's this going to impact our team? Maybe in a negative way as we start integrating these tools.
Yeah, I just want to go back a little on the question that you said, like how do I choose between them? You know, most of the time when you're choosing, we go biased. Why we go biased? Because sometimes is the tool that you have more experience with. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I have more experience with Flow, I tend, I'm not saying that I will, but I tend to recommend more Flow. You know, if I go back a little, I remember back in the days, and that will hit hard on David as well. Back in the days in 2008, 2009, what library do I choose? MooTools or jQuery, right? And the first one that I started working was MooTools, was the very first one, you know, and I hesitate long time to adopt jQuery. You know what I'm saying? Why? Because I was more comfortable with that, you know? And so we are biased to those when choosing between them because it's the first one that we started working. And then when we are in the environment and we have the cost, and you have to think about the cost to make a decision. I think we kind of little touched that already here, because again, and I will repeat myself. You tend to literally spend a little time at the beginning. And I remember bosses, like my boss, hey, you don't have anything for me to see yet? No, I'm still doing the base setup. I always say, like, the famous thing, like, I'm basically like doing the foundation, right? And that took almost 1 week. But after everything was adopted, like, everybody, even people that never worked with typed, literally embraced that because they saw the value. You know, there is a cost. There is a learning curve, especially for people that never worked in your team, never worked with type, and they tend to question a lot. I remember that I had this coworker that he questions every single thing, and he always bashing on his Slack saying, "Why did we choose this? This thing is returning error all the time. It's annoying. It's annoying as hell." But at the end, we had a result because we shipped almost bug-free application. You know what I'm saying?
That's been my experience as well with training teams. You know, if it's a little upfront cost to get everyone used to, oh, I have to type this, or in code reviews, it's like, you know, you guys are skipping and putting any everywhere to, like, just, you know, get it out the door. Yeah. That sort of thing too, I've seen. But once you get used to it, right, the downstream benefits to being able to go back, you know, generate a type from a query or update a function return type, and then now you see all the red squiggles, and once you fix them, then it's all better.
Yeah, it's not only when we talk about we talk about tooling as well. Like the adoption is not only in regards to type itself, like, and then the cost when we're starting a project, you don't really only think about types, then you think about ESLint, Airbnb, Prettier, all those things combined together really takes time to configure. And there's a lot of articles saying that it's harder to configure Webpack than develop the entire application, you know? But at the end, you know, that will benefit you and the entire team. So that's my take on that.
Other takes on costs that you should run into or you think about?
I'd say it's the same as TDD and testing.
Yeah.
If you just want to get it out the door, you're not going to write any tests. Maybe you'll write them later, meaning never. But if you intend to live with this and it's important, you're going to do testing, and perhaps you're going to do your development writing tests first, which makes you stop and think, which is similar to the any. If you're going to move deliberately and write down the shape of your props and your state before writing the component, it's similar to you're going to write the tests. And in the total cost, the total lifecycle cost, what's cheaper, writing type information or writing tests? I would assert that writing type information is a lot cheaper, and proper type information eliminates a huge section of tests that you would have had to write, tests that you couldn't have even possibly have written because you can't get the theory completely covered. And so from the perspective of, do you have time to think? If you do, you have time to succeed by writing the type information in.
That's a fantastic point about typing, solving a huge swath of test cases. That is a really fantastic point. I think we've hit the point in the show where it's time to do takeaways, where we'll summarize some of our points of what we think are the biggest things that we think came out of the conversation today. David, what do you think? What are you struck with?
I've heard on the downside some of the complaints about Facebook as well. And I sort of jumped into using Flow just because that's what the project I was coming into was built on. I think some of the people here have not converted me, I can't say that, have made me think about trying TypeScript and checking it out. We also know, Todd, from our previous interviews that the Dojo toolkit heavily uses TypeScript as well. And so I think that with all of that propaganda, I think I might give it a shot and see what we can come out of it with. How about you?
I really like Paul's last point. Like, I really love that point about static types, or not static, type checking, solving a big problem of tests. I know that I've written unit tests and like safety checking in my code before to just make sure that an object is an object, and to like spew like an object, an array, a null, a number, a boolean, a string into a function and see how it happens. And if tools like Flow and TypeScript can solve those sort of things without me needing to write 100 lines of test code, well, that seems pretty cool. I like that a lot. Paul, what are your takeaways? What do you think is interesting? What do you want to talk about from today?
I'll give 1.5. I'll do a follow-on to what you just said. The world of Python is adopting type annotations as well. They're a little different because they preserve that information at runtime. The TypeScript compiler throws it away. There's a reflect metadata proposal for preserving that. But at the last PyCon, Facebook talked about modeling security vulnerabilities using advanced type system information. It blew my mind. I was barely qualified to sit in the chair and listen to it, but it's an interesting idea to push more of the problem into the compiler and let it reason about what is going on in the code. And then the half one on the takeaway, if you're the type of person that walks up to someone's Windows desktop and they've got their entire life on the Windows desktop instead of in subfolders, and it bugs you so much that you can barely talk to them, you are a candidate for typing.
I love it. I love it.
That's good.
Matt, what are your takeaways for today?
Well, I'm a big proponent of TypeScript. My biggest wins have been coming from working with and training teams at like enterprise level. It really encodes so much information that, you know, like we've mentioned, you'd have to write in tests as long as you're writing tests at all. Saves you from that. It saves you from a lot of documentation and being able to communicate that meaning. You know, and when you bring all of the safe assumptions that tools can make from it, you know, GraphQL being the big one for me. You can working especially in React, which I do so much. The dependability of your components. It's just it's really just unmatched. I think really it's a great move for the ecosystem to regardless of what system they adopt, to adopt a type system. I think it's a good move in general for client side development.
Awesome. Paulo, how about you?
My takeaway that I was happy to know that I'm not the only one that believes that the foundation, like you literally, when you start an application, you need to start that right. You know, lay down the foundation right. You know, put your types there. You know, write your types, and will guard you for writing more testing cases, because that will prevent a lot of issues. So you don't need to write that much tests. And so yeah, like when you're starting a project, look for, don't rush things up. You know, just do it right from the beginning, and then you have a smooth ride all the way through.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on the show today, gentlemen. Is there anything else you'd like to plug before we go?
Follow me on Twitter. I post on this stuff all the time, and if you're at a conference I'm at, I like to talk about it too.
Throw out your Twitter handle. Throw out your Twitter handle.
Warger.
Yeah, bring a bar to the pub to New York, okay, please.
Sure.
And we'll get everybody's Twitter handles in the show notes so you can follow everybody. So thanks so much, everyone, for being on the show. We'll get the show notes up with links to all the stuff we talked about. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, I'm Todd Gardner.
I'm David Walsh. Adios.